Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hatfield, and as always, I am joined by Jonathan Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon.
And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Happy almost E3, Damon.
It is almost E3, which we thought would be a good time to have a big E3 preview episode. This will be the first E3 that both next-gen, current-gen consoles are out in the wild, so there should be a lot of really exciting next-gen software for these machines, and for everyone out there that's been fortunate enough to get their hands on one at this point. Jonathan, let's begin with Sony, kind of the elephant in the room, because obviously they're the big publisher that isn't going to be at E3, but they did just have a big event for Horizon Forbidden West recently, and there's a interview that was out this week where we learned that God of War is now going to be a 2022 game and that it's coming to both PS5 and PS4. So given that it's certainly possible Sony could have an E3 adjacent event, what are you feeling are the most likely games that we'll be getting good looks at next from PlayStation?
Yeah, we're in an interesting position because they were, when there wasn't an E3 last year, Sony was kind of the only big publisher to hold an event that specific week of their own. But this year, with the Horizon State of Play last week, I feel like that was sort of them indicating that we're going to be getting things a little bit more piecemeal. Obviously, if God of War is set for some time next year, presumably, we'll want to see that one in the relative near future, like hopefully before the end of the year. But at this point, you know, we have Ratchet and Clank out in a couple weeks. We've seen Horizon Forbidden West gameplay. Gran Turismo 7 is really the big one that's coming up next as well that we know about. But really, it's sort of the third parties that they've had partnerships with, stuff like Final Fantasy, Pragmata, Forspoken, things like that are really the big current parts of the Sony stable that we need to see more of, and we can potentially see some of that stuff at E3. It just won't be part of a PlayStation conference.
Yep, that's a good point. We'll talk about some of those third parties coming up in just a bit. Horizon Forbidden West is apparently on schedule to ship this year, although they're not 100% committing to that and don't have a release date yet. But are you expecting, Jonathan, Horizon to be PlayStation's big holiday release this year?
If it's able to hit that release date, and based on the comments that Herman Hulst was saying in that recent interview, it definitely feels like they are not opposed to pushing it if they need to. And considering Horizon did so well on the PS4 when it launched in February, I'm sure they're not too worried. But if it's not, the PlayStation 4 went a lot of holiday seasons without any really big exclusives. Sony is definitely okay to let third parties, whether it's exclusive partnerships or just the big third party games that we come to expect every year, kind of take the reins. And so I wouldn't be shocked if Horizon moves, that they're not really rushing to put something else in its place. If it does hit this fall, I think they're going to try to make sure it gets as much attention, as much room as possible, give it a really great release date, and give it a really big focus for the PlayStation crowd.
Well, with Sony sitting out another E3, Ryan, that really gives Xbox a moment to shine. What do you expect to see from Xbox at the show this year? And what do you think Microsoft really has to do to impress everyone?
Well, I think number one, we will see Halo again. That's inevitable. I mean, they, in their promotional teaser image for their E3 showcase, the Xbox Bethesda showcase, Halo and Master Chief are featured very prominently in that teaser image. So that's a guarantee. And it was obvious, of course. And it's crucial that Halo show well. I mean, this is going to be the first time that they've shown Halo since last July. So it's going to be 11 months after they delayed it for a full year following that, not super well received initial gameplay reveal last summer. So this is kind of the do or die moment for Halo. I mean, I guess the ultimate release of the game is its do or die moment, but I think this next showing at E3 is going to really set the narrative for a while on Halo. If it shows well, people are going to be really getting excited about Halo again. I know we have some poll results for later in the show that are sort of indicative of that. But if it disappoints again, that just makes the hill even steeper to climb for Halo as it comes back after a 6-year layoff. So Halo being critical, and then I think, as far as what else we're likely to see, I would be shocked if Psychonauts 2 wasn't shown prominently. We've been getting some little just quick teases on Twitter from Double Fine that, hey, the game's definitely on track. It's coming out. It's not going to be too much longer. And that's one where, and I think I've seen a bit of chatter out there of people wondering, well, might Microsoft just go ahead and release that game during E3 and say, show it and then go, and it's out now, download it on Game Pass right now. That's definitely possible. I feel like Psychonauts is a big enough game and a meaningful enough game in the first party portfolio where I don't think I would necessarily expect that, but I also wouldn't put it past them. And then don't forget that the Xbox release, the next gen only release, seemingly, of Microsoft Flight Simulator that was announced at the Game Awards for summer. It's been quiet ever since on that, so I expect to get not just a new gameplay trailer for that, but almost certainly a concrete near future release date for Flight Simulator as well. So I think those are the first party games that we're just pretty much guaranteed to see. And then I think we'll talk more here in a minute about stuff that's maybe more rumored or a little less certain.
Now, of course, this year at E3, Microsoft will be joined by Bethesda. And Ryan, you've gone on the record on this show saying you expect to see Starfield there this year. You still feel that way?
Absolutely. I mean, it's $7.5 billion later. That's the big one. I mean, that's the ace up their sleeve. That is the new Todd Howard game, the big new franchise potentially here from Bethesda. There's no way it's not finally shown in some capacity. Maybe it won't even be gameplay. Maybe it'll just be a cinematic teaser. But, per Jason Schreier, investigative reporter extraordinaire for Bloomberg, he says that we'll get a release date teaser during the show, and that date is late 2022 as of now, which makes sense. I mean, I wasn't necessarily counting on it coming out this year. I thought there was a chance we might see it this holiday, but I'm so confident that we're gonna see it in some capacity for a lot of reasons. Not only because the game has been in development for a while, it's been rumored for a while, it's been confirmed for a while. There was like a little tiny leak of maybe a little screenshot. I think maybe Jonathan might correct me, upwards of a year ago, something like that. It's just time. It's time to show something from Starfield, particularly as the shiny new crown jewel in Microsoft's collection for Bethesda here. So I think that could even be like the one more thing at the end of the show.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to think now with God of War's delay into 2022, we could see Starfield going up against God of War, the sequel to God of War, maybe sometime later in 2022. Anything else from Bethesda? Do you think Bethesda might have more than one game to show, or do you think is Starfield? Do you think what they might want to focus on?
Well, it's certainly probable they have enough studios, but you can knock two of them out of the running right away, which are Ghostwire Tokyo, which is due out this fall, as well as Deathloop, also due out this fall, because those are, of course, timed PlayStation 5 exclusives as a result of the arrangement made between Sony and Bethesda prior to the Microsoft acquisition. So I think we can safely rule those out of the Xbox E3 press conference. Xbox players can look forward to those hitting Game Pass in 2022. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, id Software just shipped Doom Eternal a year ago, and they've just finished up their 2 story DLCs, which I reviewed for IGN. So I feel like it's too early to see anything from id. Now, there is the possibility with Machine Games. They haven't shipped anything in a little while now. They've been hard at work on the Indiana Jones game that got announced. Yes. So maybe we get a teaser there, because obviously there is a chance that that's going to be a third-party game, a multi-platform game, if that arrangement was made, again, with Lucasfilm prior to the acquisition. We don't know. But even still, even if that's the case, odds are it's going to debut on a Microsoft stage. So that could be a really exciting one as well.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Nintendo is not a name that we talk about very often on this show, but of course, rumors about an upgraded Switch model, a Switch Pro, continue to swirl, and the latest rumors say that a reveal of the Switch Pro is imminent. And Nintendo has revealed it will have a Nintendo Direct during E3, but it has said the Direct is going to focus exclusively on games. So the console probably won't be revealed during that Direct. But Jonathan, does that tell you we should we might expect a reveal of an upgraded Switch console to happen before E3, so that E3 Direct can just focus on games and maybe something exclusive to launch with this upgraded system?
I mean, I'm definitely always a little wary to pin anything on Nintendo plans because I feel like they can change quite drastically. But I guess just to pull back the curtain, we're recording on a Wednesday.
Right.
The show goes up on a Friday. Nintendo loves to post news on Thursdays, so it is quite possible in between recording and the show posting that they announce a Switch Pro, because Thursday mornings and Thursday evenings our time, which are the start of the day in Japan, tend to be when they love to announce big stuff. So I wouldn't be shocked. And the thing about it being announced before E3 that makes sense is that they get to show and then talk a lot about how those games will take advantage of the Switch hardware, the new hardware. It's very possible they don't announce it beforehand, but at least to me it makes sense because you get to say so much more about these games, the way they'll play, their performance and stability and, frame rate and all that sort of stuff that people want to hear about. They'll be able to talk about those things. And if they don't announce the Switch Pro, then it leaves a lot of questions of like, okay, well, will Breath of the Wild 2 run better on the Switch Pro, and how so? Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, Pokemon fans, but Arceus, the open world
Right.
Pokemon game,
Right.
had a pretty poorly running first trailer debut. It looks very cool, but it looked like the frame rate wasn't so great. So that game probably would benefit from a Switch Pro trailer to be able to talk about. So at least like in terms of what their focuses are, I think it would make a lot of sense to show it beforehand. But with Nintendo these days, I could never say for sure.
Sure. Of course, later this month, a new Mario Golf is coming to Switch. They'll have Skyward Sword HD next month. And I had completely forgotten about this. Splatoon 3 is a thing that's still coming. That's a very likely candidate to be shown off at E3. Ryan, what's your gut tell you about the latest round of Switch Pro rumors and its potentially imminent reveal?
Well, I'm actually respectfully of the opposite opinion of Jonathan on this one. I think Nintendo's going to stay entirely quiet on the hardware front, not only during E3, as they've already explicitly stated that they're going to do, but leading up to it. I mean, as we record here, as Jonathan noted, it's June 2nd as we're recording this episode. That leaves us less than 2 weeks until Nintendo's E3 briefing. That's not a lot of time. And I also think that Nintendo's not going to want to subject themselves to the Osborne effect. If you're not familiar, it's basically it's a phenomenon where you can kill the hype and interest in your own product because you've announced a future better product too soon. And I know you could say, well, they announced the Switch several months before it came out, but the difference there is that was a whole new hardware generation. And they were coming off of something that they wanted to forget in the form of the Wii U. In this case, this is a mid-cycle upgrade. They're going to want to continue to sell every single vanilla Switch that they can keep selling. So I think they're going to play it close to the chest for a while. We're still, 3 to 4 months away from the rumored release date of the new Switch. I think they can have their E3 and show, hopefully, Breath of the Wild 2 and a lot of other cool games, and show them and keep the focus on those games, but then come back after E3, closer to the launch of this thing, and do a more technical deep dive and say, hey, we showed you Breath of the Wild 2 at E3, and now let's tell you all about what the Switch Pro is going to do for it from a technical enhancement perspective. So I think they're going to keep it close to the chest, and they're going to stay quiet on the hardware front for a while longer.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we call a pickup. Some new information has come to light since we recorded this episode yesterday. We are about to talk about Square Enix's showing at E3, and now Square Enix has revealed several of the games that we'll be bringing. You may have noticed I've gotten a haircut since then, but this is what happens sometimes when you record your episode 2 days before it publishes. Anyway, Square Enix has confirmed it will be bringing new Marvel's Avengers content to E3 with Black Panther. And they're also going to be showing Babylon's Fall, which is a Platinum Games title that was revealed at E3 several years ago now. So they're going to be trotting that one back out. As for Final Fantasy 16, Forspoken, will those games be there? Well, I can bring you back to the conversation that we had yesterday. And then there's the previously mentioned Forspoken from Square Enix, which we don't know a lot about. It seems to be a post-apocalyptic world with very cool traversal. Jonathan, was that revealed to be a PlayStation exclusive?
I think as of right now, we know it is a PlayStation launch exclusive, one of those where who knows what exactly the fine print might be, what the timing on it is, and whatnot. But as far as we know, it's looking to be a PlayStation console launch exclusive. And that feels like one we'll probably see some from Square Enix. That's definitely one of the ones that I think made a really big splash when it was previously called Project Athia at one of the PS5 reveal events last year. And then the trailer where it got a proper name this year. I think that's definitely high up on their list of upcoming games to show for sure.
There's also Final Fantasy 16, which I believe was revealed as part of a Sony event last year. Could be time to revisit that one. I'm personally excited to see more of Project Triangle Strategy. I hope that'll be there. Another rumored Square Enix game in development is this Final Fantasy Souls-like game. Jonathan, what do we know about that, and do you expect to see it at Square Enix's presentation?
Yeah, this is one that we've definitely seen some pretty solid reporting on. So I would pretty much expect this to be at whatever Square Enix is going to be doing at E3, whether it's their own showcase or a partner showcase. But this one feels like a pretty solid bet. It seems to be that they're doing a Souls-like or Neo-like game set in, apparently the reports say, the original Final Fantasy universe, being made by Team Ninja, allegedly. And that feels like a really exciting sort of shift for Final Fantasy. They have a lot of different Final Fantasy projects going on right now between FF7 Remake, Final Fantasy 16, now potentially this other game. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're really going to go all out on here's what the future of Final Fantasy is.
And then there's Ubisoft. And yes, this is a pickup that we're filming after the main episode because new information has come to light since then. Ubisoft has revealed what it's going to be showing at its Ubisoft Forward event June 12th at noon Pacific. They will be showing us more Far Cry 6, even though they just had a big event dedicated to that game just recently. They'll be having Riders Republic, the next entry in the Rainbow Six franchise, which is formerly known as Rainbow Six Quarantine. But Jonathan, big question in my mind is Beyond Good and Evil 2. Last update we got on that game was last September when Ubisoft said they would be showing the game sometime in 2021. E3 seems like a pretty good time to remind everyone that that game still exists. Wouldn't you agree?
It does seem like a pretty good time. I just don't know if it's going to end up being the right time. Now that we have an actual sort of look at what Ubisoft is going to be bringing, I wonder if they might hold Beyond Good and Evil 2 for potentially another Ubi Forward or some sort of event later this year. You know, last year they showed that they're not afraid to do multiple events a year now, and so that's already a pretty busy lineup for them to have things to show off, including some brand new games and updates on games that are already existing, like Siege and Valhalla. So I wouldn't be shocked if, as much as people are looking forward to, myself included, seeing more of that game, I wouldn't be surprised if the wait might last a little long.
Man, I don't know. If not now, when, Ubisoft? Ryan, I know you're a fellow Splinter Cell fan. Any chance we're going to get some new Splinter Cell information out of E3 this year?
Number one, Damon, your haircut looks excellent.
Thank you.
Number two, yes, welcome to the annual E3 Splinter Cell Watch, where we end up disappointed every year. Our membership probably shrinks year over year as people give up. I will never quite give up, but it just doesn't seem like something that the company's interested. They do value the character. Sam Fisher keeps showing up in other Ubisoft games, so maybe sooner or later it'll happen. And you know what? I'll say this. If and when it ever does happen, I hope it's a total surprise and nothing leaks and it's just one of those genuine, fun, awesome E3 moments, which, like, it would remind me of when Mirror's Edge 2, Mirror's Edge Catalyst got announced. We were all like completely floored. We'd hoped for it for years and it finally happened. Sadly, that game didn't turn out quite as great as the first one, but yeah, it's unlikely, but you never quite know, and I hope it surprises us one day.
I will never give up hope. In any case, the Ubisoft E3 press conference kicks off Saturday, June 12th at noon Pacific. Should last about an hour. And finally, Ryan, Bandai Namco is participating in E3 Software's Elden Ring. It was revealed at E3 2 or 3 years ago now, I think at a Microsoft conference, and there's been nothing since. That has not stopped a fan base from digging up any little scrap of information. Is it time to get sort of a more official reveal of Elden Ring at E3 this year?
I would be shocked if this E3 goes by without Elden Ring being demoed or showcased in some way, shape, or form. Because you're right. I mean, it was at least 2 years ago, at least 2019, if not even 2018, when it debuted on Microsoft stage. And it's, yeah, you're talking about a combination of From Software and George R.R. Martin. That is a very enticing combination. So, yeah, I think the time has finally arrived for that one. That could be one of the biggest third-party games on anybody's stage, and I am very much expecting it. I don't know on who, whether it's going to be Microsoft again, presumably, or whether when Sony does something, or if Bandai will plan their own little just separate gameplay reveal like we got with Far Cry 6 last week. But one way or another, I think we'll see Elden Ring in the next 30 days.
Well, speaking of big E3 games, we polled the IGN audience last week, asked them which Microsoft or Bethesda game are you most excited to see at E3? And perhaps surprisingly, Starfield came out on top, although just barely. Starfield had about 28% of the votes, and Halo Infinite was at 26.
Oh, wow.
But I was a little bit surprised to see Starfield beat out Halo there. Ryan, was that a surprise to you?
Actually, no. I thought Starfield would have won that poll a lot more handily. So
wow.
I think that speaks well to Halo. People just hanging in there and still excited for it. I thought that the prospect of Starfield and finally seeing this new Todd Howard Bethesda Game Studios game would have propelled that to an easy poll victory. But good to see that. Yeah, good to see the sort of more than one Microsoft first-party game run neck and neck in a poll. So it's lots of good options finally.
Down at the bottom of the poll, unfortunately for me, it was Perfect Dark with less than 10% of the vote. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
Give it time.
Our poll for you next week. We want to know which E3 conference are you most excited for? That takes Sony out of the running, so it should be interesting. Ubisoft, EA, Microsoft, Jeff Keighley's Summer Games Fest, or Devolver, which we didn't even get to cover, but Devolver always has a really fun showing at E3. Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we'll share the results with you next week. And that will just about do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. We'll be back, same Next Gen time, same Next Gen channel next week, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. Next week, there is a big Next Gen PlayStation 5 exclusive game out next week. So it should be a pretty fun episode next Friday. Everybody take care, and we will see you then.